work in a 5-county region in New York State, and I'm going to talk about a couple different ways to improve meat marketing in the local meats, local foods kind of market, and especially about marketing channel selection and marketing channel assessment. But to give you my background, boy, that is huge. So I work in Tompkins County as a marketing specialist, and I'm on a 5-county team. But before that, I worked for the New England Heritage Breeds Conservancy and the New England Livestock Alliance. Both of those went out of business in 2005. But while I was working with them, I did come down and do work in Maryland. I don't know if any of you were beef producers at that time, but we came down here and we actually bought finished cattle out of Maryland for our brand, even though it was named New England. And I've been on a lot of Maryland beef farms, so I'm really pleased to be back here. And then when they went out of business, I went to Cornell to get a master's in food marketing so that I could return to this kind of a job. So that's my background. What I'm going to talk about today are a few of the factors, the ways that you assess a marketing channel. So marketing channels will be covered here, but there are all these different ways that you sell. And for example, I saw how many of you are just fact-finding today, but how many of you are in farmers markets now? Okay. What are the other kinds of ways that you're selling? Are you selling conventionally to auction barns or to the big slaughterhouses? Anyone? Auction barns? And then do you have your own farm stores? So where's it all going?
Word of mouth.
Word of mouth. Freezer trade? Freezer sales, halves and quarters? Yeah. All right. That's one I get quickly excited about. The grant that Ginger mentioned is I got a grant to open an experiment with meat lockers in 2 counties in New York State. Traditional, old-school meat lockers where people buy a quarter or a half from a farmer, and they store it in the meat locker, and then they come once or twice a week, and they get out the cuts that they want to use. It's trying to address some of the barriers that keep people from buying meat that way, but of course that's a really great way to sell, and it's a great way for the consumer to buy, so I hope to sort of foster that in my area. And really it came out of the work that I'm going to talk about today. So factors for marketing channel selection, factors for marketing channel assessment to gauge how well that channel is performing for you, and then a methodology for assessing channels if you're actively marketing in multiple channels. And when I say multiple channels, that could even include multiple farmers markets. If you're anyone doing 3 farmers markets a week seasonally? 4? 5? Okay. When I talk about marketing channels, sometimes people use wholesale and direct in different terminology, so I just want to get us all on the same page for this presentation. When I say direct marketing channels, I mean a marketing channel where you're making the sale to the person who's going to eat. All right? And when you're wholesaling, you're making a sale to someone else who's in turn going to sell it to the person who eats. So auction barns and conventional sales, commodity sales, they all go over on the wholesale side, as do restaurants and independent grocery stores, natural food stores, anybody else that you're selling to. And then when you're doing things like farmers markets and meat CSAs, anybody doing a meat CSA? All right. Everybody know what CSA means? It means community supported agriculture. So that's how I'll use these terms. Now first we're talking about marketing channel selection. So when you start, especially for those of you that are fact finders today, when you start to figure out how and when and where you're going to sell your product, there's some consideration, right? So those are the factors for marketing channel selection. A vague question, what is your production like? Where are you located? Where's your farm located? What's your local population like? And then what do your customers want? That's a great marketing question that honestly I think sometimes people overlook. What do customers want? So your production could be considered by scale of production and then also diversity, right? So if we think about vegetable producers, sometimes this is easier to think about. Farmers market and CSA type vegetable producers could be growing 45 different crops, right? That's highly diverse. When it comes to livestock farms, I don't tend to think about each individual cut as a different product. It's all beef or it's all pork. So you might be lower on the diversity scale, but I just make some generalizations here. If you're farm A, let's talk about that vegetable farm, with 45 different crops produced on 2 acres, wholesale marketing channels just probably don't make a lot of sense, right? It makes sense to be involved in direct marketing. Huge diversity, small scale. On the other hand, a corn and soybean grower cultivating 1,000 acres isn't going to go to the farmer's market to sell soybeans, right? That's not going to work. So those are 2 extremes, and then you could think about with your farm and your breadth of products and the amount that you produce, that's a factor for figuring out where you should go. I did have a producer in my state. In his first year, he finished 2 beef cattle as opposed to 40, and he came to a meeting like this that we had, and he said he was going into restaurant sales. You know, it may not immediately make sense to go into restaurant sales when you only finish 2 head. And I'm not making fun of him because he did it and it worked. The restaurants had his meat on special until it was gone. So it can be done, but sometimes there's just a certain logic to scale and diversity, selecting marketing channels for you. Oh, sorry, I didn't switch that to Maryland when I came down here. It's still New York State. Okay, what's your production like in terms of specialization? The consideration here is the more specialized your product is, the larger an area you will probably need to sell it in. Now, you're fortunate to be so close to large cities down here, so maybe this is a little more moot, but if you're in a rural area and you have a highly specialized product, you're going to have to think about how to market and which channels are available to get further out of your region. The questions to ask are, how far are the customers willing to go to get such a specialized product? And I'm thinking here when I say specialized about very specific rare old breeds or certified organic or any other very specific production protocol or any of the certification programs like Certified Humane. You're making your product more and more unique and more specialized, which is great from a marketing perspective, but you may need to look further and further out to get it all sold, right? Okay, and then, so how far is your customer willing to come to get this product, or how far are you willing to go to get it sold, right? So also look at your location and your local population. I work with a lot of beginning farmers in my region. You know, when they start working on their production budgets and their business plans, they figure out that they need premium pricing for this farm to work, right? They need really high prices. So they all target as an audience the food connoisseur who's going to pay top dollar. But sometimes you have to look at where you are and, well, how many of them are there where you live, right? What's your visibility? If you're running a vegetable you-pick farm and you're on a rural road, that's not a good combination of your visibility and your marketing channel selection. Furthermore, you know, what are the customers that are around you and how many of them are there? And if you're targeting a certain population, you need to take that into consideration. Real basic marketing considerations. So I'm going to try to do a rundown of who I think local foods buyers are, specifically local meats buyers. Try to put them into some groups so that you can develop a strategy taking all those factors that we just discussed into consideration and guiding your market channel selection. You know, I mentioned the word strategy, which is my favorite thing to talk about, and I don't really have it worked into this presentation, but there's marketing strategy 101, which is we sell whatever we have to anyone that will buy it. Anybody employing that strategy right now? We sell whatever we have to anyone that will buy it? All right, marketing strategy 102 is targeting some audience and thinking about them in every way that you can, catering to them and marketing to them. So I'm going to talk you through these groups and show you how they would prefer different marketing channels and other things about your marketing. I really want you to understand your target audience and serve them and hopefully move your strategy beyond we sell whatever we have to anyone that will buy it. So I've come up with 4 main groups of local meat buyers. The foodie, right, the locavore, and they're primarily driven by the experience that they're going to get with your product. There's the socially motivated, the sort of green buyer who wants to support local agriculture, grass-based agriculture, humane handling of livestock, any number of issues. And I lumped into that group all of the personal health people who may, say something to the effect of, even if they didn't care about local agriculture, they still want grass-fed meats because of their perception about the health values, right? So I lumped those two groups together. The traditional buyer, who is really just value-driven, price-driven, and then the ethnic and religious buyers who are culturally motivated. They're satisfying some tradition or belief system. And that's a new group for me to present on, but after I had been presenting on 3 groups of local meat buyers for so long, a goat producer really challenged me to think about that 4th group, and I think it makes a lot of sense. All right, each one of these groups have different needs, motivations, desires, and shopping habits. And I broke out those 4 qualities to help you think about how to target these people and how to meet them where they shop, which is your marketing channel, right? So if we think about a need, I'm going to hop off meat and talk about carrots because it's funnier, all right? The need is I need carrots, right? I need to eat. And then the motivation is something that they would add to that purchase, so that I need carrots, but I'm going to buy them at the farmer's market because of all these great attributes that farmer's market carrots have. They're locally grown, perhaps they're free of sprays, or supporting local agriculture. So those are my motivations. That's why I'm going to go shop at the farmer's market. Then there's the desires. The desires are the icing on the cake. Yes, there's just orange carrots and they're no spray or they're local or whatever you want to say, but then there's the nice desires on top, like I need red cord Chantenay because I'm having a dinner party and I want to say that, right? Which is a legitimate motivation or desire, I guess, to buy fancy carrots, right? That's very real. I think you can agree. Then there's the buying habits. Yeah, in my scenario, the person wound up at the farmer's market. In my town, the farmer's market is huge, and it's really dominated by tourists. We have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old in my house, and my wife does most of our food shopping. She's not going to wait a half an hour for parking and get 2 kids out of car seats to buy red cord Chantenay carrots, right? So that's the buying habits. If someone were to target mothers with young children who care about these things, they would select a marketing channel that works, right, for that kind of buyer. And I think that would be a good strategy right there. So here we go. Let's talk about each group a little bit more in depth and look at the marketing channels that they're most likely to utilize. There's a lot of generalizations here, and there's blurring of the lines. A lot of foodies, I think you could say, are socially motivated and so on, but we're going to try to look at them as distinct populations in the hopes that you can develop a strategy based on one of these groups. So what's the foodie after? The foodie is after the experience. And you can deliver the experience sincerely. They could go buy Neiman Ranch product. You all know what Neiman Ranch is. Or they could go buy some other brand that delivers some of those values, but it doesn't do it as authentically as you, because you can tell the story about being on your farm and why you're involved in farming and what you love about it. And that's part of the experience. Speaking with you, hearing your story, picking out the product, even the cooking. These are the people that put up pictures of their dinner on Facebook. How many of you have done that? I'm totally guilty. I've put pictures of pork chops, raw pork chops with my homemade dry rub in a bowl, put it on Facebook, right? So that's a foodie, sort of. I don't know if I'm totally a foodie, but that's sort of foodie. So it's that whole experience and that story. People really do this. They go into the office on Monday and tell their friends where they bought it. Oh, this cute little farm in northern Maryland, right? They're going to tell that story. This young couple's raising pigs. They're going to tell that story. That's the experience that you're selling along with the meat. I think I drove that point home. This group's probably the least price sensitive. They are adventurous. So they're adventurous in the sense that they might buy unusual cuts from you, but they're also adventurous in the sense that they might try your product this week, and then they're going to go eat somebody else's product because they want to try all of it, right? So they may not be the most loyal people out there, but they could be. I'm making some generalizations. Where do they shop? They'll definitely shop at farmers markets. They want to meet you. They want to hear the story. They'll buy from a meat CSA, or if there's a meat add-on share to a vegetable CSA. They'll go to specialty stores, whether it's a local food store, natural food store. They'll order your product off the menu at a restaurant. And I included this online because of peer pressure, but I suppose they could be ordering meat online. Is anybody selling online, shipping meat? No. Ginger, is there anything that you don't do? You got your hand for everyone. All right. Yeah. All right. The socially motivated buyer, the green group. This is your typical Ithacan, okay? So they believe they're voting with their dollar. They're going to support what they believe in with their purchases. There are studies that show that even lower income socially motivated buyers will pay a premium price because they really believe in that, and they'll spend extra beyond their household budget to acquire your product. They're looking at local foods for a number of reasons. The perceptions of food safety or environmental sustainability, personal health, humane treatment of livestock, perhaps it's old breeds, preserving old breeds, my old job. So they're going to come in with a more diverse selection of motivations. They're going to ask more sophisticated questions about how you handle and feed livestock, how you treat them. They've done some reading on the topic. They might be misinformed, all right, but they're going to have a lot of questions. And where do they shop? This is a group that understands the farmer's time and what it takes to do marketing, the plight of the farmer, if you will. So they'll come to the farm. They'll buy. I put bulk here. Do you all just call it freezer trade down here? I call it freezer trade, halves and quarters. They'll still purchase at natural food stores, local food stores, and farmers markets, and certainly join a CSA. They're very similar buying habits. All right, you have the traditional buyer. This is the group that I feel is always overlooked. Traditional buyers of local meats. My parents bought a side of beef in the 70s because, local foods wasn't a term, right? That's just how you got meat. There's still a lot of traditional buyers out there. They're value-driven. They recognize the value of buying in bulk. I'd say that's the primary way that they'd buy, but they could also come to the farm and buy individual cuts out of your freezer. I have you pick there. Clearly, I did not fix my slide. Although there is, on the next slide, there's you slaughter. Okay, they're experienced buyers. They're very loyal. If you sell them a good product at a good price, they will come back. In fact, probably some of you in the room have been selling to the same families for decades. I know farmers in my region. They've been selling to the same families for 15, 20 years. So that's a great loyal buyer. So once you put that initial investment of acquiring a customer like that, the marketing investment after that is very small, right? Even the time commitment. A quick phone call, they're going to buy a quarter, and sold. I really like this audience, and I think that even new farm businesses could get creative and think about how to be sustainable while targeting this group. The last group I probably know the least about, the ethnic and the religiously motivated group. I got it mostly firsthand from a goat producer in Massachusetts. One thing she said is that they really want to be treated well. If they're an immigrant population, they may have been to some farms and treated coarsely. All right? If you do treat them well, she found out, they are the gateway to a huge population that will come to you for meat. So this woman was selling live goats on the farm. This is where the U-Pick belongs because they come to the farm and they slaughter there. You kill, right? But they also buy meat in other formats, cuts, live animals. They are experienced buyers. They know what they want, and they are loyal. So I think they're a unique group. I'll say I have a friend who's a graduate student at Cornell, and he's from Mexico. He's always looking for marrow bones, right? So that's not a religious motivation. That's just a cultural tradition. He came to the U.S. He comes from a beef farm in Mexico, and he was not thrilled with what he found here. But there is a population, if you're around a big city, that will look for unique products. Yeah? Different states. beautiful thing in New York State, I mean, we won't go down the road of USDA inspected and custom in New York State, but the beautiful thing is if you sell a live animal, then you're all done. You sold a live animal. What they do with the animal, and if you provide them a facility, is what they're doing with their animal. So that, I mean, it's real clean and easy in New York State. I don't know Maryland meat marketing laws. So marketing channel selection, you know, opportunity is knocking. Here are some ways to sell meat in the local foods market. Often I'm giving a presentation like this at a conference where there's a farmer panel. I think the farmer panel is Ginger. And someone will tell this wild success story about marketing their meat to restaurants or starting their meat CSA or even farmers market sales. And it's, especially for the fact finders, it's easy to leave this conference charged up about one of these channels. But how do you really assess the performance of that channel? And that's where I'm going to switch gears now and talk about marketing channel assessment. A methodology for you to assess an opportunity. So I have this funny cartoon to illustrate. I think it's funny. Joe, if you bring your beef to the farmer's market, the prices are so high you can sell $500 worth per hour. Does this sound like a hot opportunity? Anyone? Anyone? All right. That's great. I'm going to sell there. He's going. And he leaves. He did not assess the marketing channel. All right. It costs $300 a day in fees to sell there. Okay? That's kind of, you know, hurting our opportunity. The market's only 1 hour a week. Right? It takes 12 hours of labor to get ready to pack, travel. And if it rains, nobody will show up. Okay, this is more reflection on the realities of assessing an opportunity. It sounded great. Now it doesn't sound so hot, does it? So what happened is I worked with first produce farms and then livestock farms to find out what were the factors that they were using to evaluate the ways that they currently market. These were well-established farms that are considered to have a lot of marketing success in our region. And through working with them and conversation, I began to hear the factors that they use to evaluate their marketing channels. And they were all expressed in this funny cartoon. I say that there's 6 interacting factors because you can't just isolate one. It starts to become very confusing. Let's think about cars, my other favorite thing to talk about. If you heard about a car that could go from 0 to 60 in some record time, it might sound like a really great car, right? So that's one factor. But then if you found out that the seats are super uncomfortable and there's no brakes, now it doesn't sound like such a great car, right? So it takes cornering and comfort and braking and acceleration and fuel mileage. All these factors go together to make a great car. Same with a marketing channel. All these factors have to sort of be entwined and working well for the channel to be great. So one of them is the price that you can get and the implied amount of profit that you can get from that marketing channel. The next are the associated costs. What are the fees that it takes to sell there? You know, if you're in farmers markets, you have to pay a farmers market fee. You have to produce plastic bags for people to carry their product away, right? So you have to buy some of those things. If you're wholesaling, you might have to pay for cardboard boxes and packaging and brochures and nice fancy labels, right? So there's always some associated cost with each channel. The volume of product that channel can buy from you, I'm going to say in a given time period. When I'm talking with produce growers, that's usually a week because produce is highly perishable. When we're talking about meat, probably mostly frozen meat, perishability is not an issue, but you still want to look at the volume of product that you can move in a given time period. The amount of labor that it takes you to sell. I'm talking here about marketing labor. Marketing labor for me begins at harvest, right? When you make a decision to harvest an animal, everything that happens after that point, I would argue, is marketing channel specific. Which slaughterhouse you use, whether you use the custom or the USDA inspected house, is going to depend on where that product is destined, right? Or maybe you're marketing a live animal and you're going to just put it on somebody else's tractor trailer and wave goodbye. But that's where marketing labor begins. You've got harvest, you've got processing, all the travel time, and then the amount of time it takes to sell. All those together come up to be your labor requirements. Then there's the risks. Every marketing channel has risk. price risk, and other risks. I'll talk about each of these factors more in depth, except for associated costs. I'm going to kind of leave aside because I think you all understand what that is. Okay, then, and this was the surprising to me as a applied economics graduate student working with food marketing, to hear from the farmers, but there's lifestyle preferences. What do you enjoy doing? Do you like the way that you're selling? Does it create stress and anger? Well, then it's not a good marketing channel, right? I don't care what the price is. If you hate it, it's not good, right? That's a big factor. Those factors, by the way, they apply in what we're talking about with livestock, but they also, we also can tease out a few additional ones that are specific to livestock and not for produce. So the LMCAT means Livestock Marketing Channel Assessment Tool. And I was trying to identify the factors that are important and come up with a way, in essence, to measure each factor, right? That's assessment. One way that we can measure price is to convert all prices from all marketing channels into a hot carcass weight equivalent price, right? Because then we can compare that opportunity to commodity prices that are posted up by the USDA, right? We can look at freezer trade. And so if you have a farmer's market, I work with the farm to work backwards into a hot carcass weight equivalent price. Now we can compare all channels for that price. The percent of the carcass that is demanded. You know, I hear a lot of success stories about restaurant sales, high prices, consistent, you know, they're always coming back and ordering more, but are they buying the whole carcass? And I usually have a whole, I think I cut it out of here, but I usually have a whole slide dedicated to inventory management of every cut from the carcass. It's complicated, and a marketing channel that only demands 25% of your carcass, you know, that's a strike against that channel. Doesn't mean we have to throw it out, but we want to take that into consideration. Okay, the volume of product that you can sell in a given amount of time, whether we're going to look at 1 week or 1 month, we're just going to pick a time slot and look at the amount of product that sells. How well you enjoy selling there. Do you like it? All right, how much labor it takes in hours, and then how risky you perceive that marketing channel to be. Those are the factors that I found we're able to measure when we do a short amount of data collection with individual farms. You have this moving target problem, and the target's actually moving. Usually it stops when I do this PowerPoint. Which channel is best? If you go on isolated single factors, it becomes confusing. I mean, look at this graph down here at the bottom. You look at marketing channels, like direct marketing channels that offer relatively high prices, they tend to consume a low volume. So how do you know if that's good compared to high volume, low price? And there's all these factors we could generalize this way. So how do you know? Well, what you do is you take logs for a short period of time. I have here, collect logs of all marketing labor from X number of head for X number of weeks. What that means is it depends on your farm. If you're in farmers markets and you say, using farmers markets, we can sell 3 hogs every 2 weeks, then that's how long I want to keep track on your farm, right? You know that you consistently go all the way through 3 hogs in 2 weeks, then that fills in those X's. All right. In addition, we're going to collect weights on every cut. Unfortunately, that's what it takes. But if you do this, I call this snapshot data collection. We're going to just do this for a little while. We're not going to try to do it all year, every day. We're going to do it for a snapshot period that we think is representative of the farm and the business, and then we're going to extrapolate. Collect gross sales and the mileage for that period, and then have you rank out how well you enjoy each marketing channel that you're using and how risky you think it is. So we just keep logs for a short period of time. Once we have that, then we can start to compare and just give ranks. So if you're in, let's just say to make it easy, you're in 4 farmers markets, farmers market 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now we can rank each one of them as the best or the worst for each factor that we measured. Right? That's all this is. It's really simple. Sometimes it's almost funny to me how easy this is. You're just ranking. So we're going to look at the profit per head that you can get through that channel, the hot carcass weight price, or the equivalent of the hot carcass weight price, the percent of the carcass that is demanded by the channel, how many hours it took, and the volume. Those factors, we've found a way to measure them by collecting that data. We're also just going to have you rank how risky you feel individual channels are. And risk just means lost sales. Like in that cartoon, I'm at the farmer's market. If it rains, nobody shows up. I lost an opportunity to sell. That's a degree of riskiness. That's up to the individual farm. I won't assign that. And then how well you enjoy. You put that rank on there too. You say, I've met cranky old New England livestock farmers who say, I hate farmers markets. I go there. I talk to people all day. And when I get home, this is what they really said to me. I have to lay in a dark room, right? They're just like drained. And I have met very perky young people who say, boy, when I leave the farmer's market, I am just so charged up from talking to people all day. You know, it's really, really funny to hear people's reactions to dealing with people all day, answering the same questions. What's the first question you get at the farmer's market? Where's your farm? Are you local? Organic. That's what I usually hear. Usually there's like everybody says it at once. Or are you grass-fed? Are you organic? I mean, vegetable farmers get the exact same question. First question, someone walks up to their booth, are you organic? And then you start to explain probably why you're not certified organic, right? Okay, so when we do measure, we can wind up with charts like this. Now, these charts are real data, but I'll admit they're real data from a vegetable farm. It doesn't really matter. Here we're looking at the sales volume by channel. I took their gross sales figures from the time period that we were collecting data, and I normalized them. All that normalized means is I took the smallest unit and I divided everything by it. So the Watkins Farmers Market, I don't know if you can read that from where you're sitting. That says Watkins Farmers Market. It took 1 unit of product in dollars. And that means that the CSA down here took 8 times as much product in that same time period. The restaurant took 1 unit. This other farmer's market, it's IFM, Ithaca Farmers Market, took 2 units basically, and so on. Now we can rank. If we're caring about volume, which channel did the best? You did. You're number 1. You're number 6, right? That's a simple ranking. So we've got 1 criteria ranked. Now we're going to look at how much labor it took. They kept track, they kept logs of all their marketing-specific labor. And here's what we found out. The most hours went into this Corning farmer's market at nearly 20 hours. The restaurant marketing channel only took 4 hours. You know, if we did single trait selection, you've heard about that, right, in genetics and breeding. If we did single trait selection, we might have concluded that, boy, this restaurant and this farmer's market are duds. But now we get over here and we put it in perspective. It only took 4 hours to sell there. So I don't really know if it's good or not. Okay, that CSA, our big volume producer, 14 hours. So when it comes to marketing labor, and we're going to assume that less labor is good, the winner is right here, right? You're number 1, you're number 6, and everybody falls out in between. Now we've ranked another data point. If that's all we did, if we stopped there, we could come up with some meaningful conclusions for farm decision making. This is a pie chart of what we just saw in terms of percentages. So we have the total labor, the 1 week's worth of labor, and how much of that labor did each marketing channel take from the farm. So let's pick on this Watkins Glen Farmers Market. It took 13% of weekly marketing labor. It contributed 5% of weekly gross sales. How's that sound as a marketing channel? It takes 13% on labor and it kicks in 5% on sales. It's a dud. All right. Let's look at the CSA. It took 18% of weekly labor. It contributed 45% of weekly income. What do we think about that? Sounds pretty good, right? So that's all we're going to do here. The restaurant, remember the restaurant, see here, it took 5% of labor and 6% of gross sales. So it's more than pulling its weight, if you will. So you take those 2 factors in combination, and now that it starts to shake out who makes sense. Yeah.
Now, are you including travel with the labor? Is that
Yep, all the travel time. That's channel specific is included. Yep.
I'm sorry, is this real data or is it just an example?
This is real data from a vegetable farm. Yep. I brought their data along as I always do because they're my big success story. But every farm that has gone, I'll say this, every farm that has done a marketing channel assessment has changed their marketing for the better. Because they get their own data that they feel good about, and they see the results. Usually it's farms that are in multiple channels, 4, I was asking 4, 3, 4, 5, and they feel like they're doing way too much. But they're not sure who to drop because they don't have a way to gauge which one's really paying off here. So this gives them that way to gauge that, and then they can start to drop the worst ones. Yeah?
So say you're selling beef. When do you start the labor? Do you start it from breeding? Do you start it from calving? Do you start it from...
Great question.
When would you start labor? Or when would you start the hours or
Right.
time frame?
As soon as, I love copping out this way. I'm going to assume that production is production, and you're going to finish all animals the same regardless of where they're going. I'm going to make that assumption for your farm. So the only time we get into channel-specific labor, I would argue, is when we decide that this animal is ready to go. So if it's going to go to JBS, you make that decision, and now you start keeping track. You're going to make a phone call. You're going to meet a tractor trailer and load the animals on, and then you're going to get a check in the mail, right? So that's channel-specific labor. Farmer's market, you're going to load the animal on, take them to the slaughterhouse, go back and pick up the meat, right? But production's production, and there's lots of good extension economists who will tell you how to figure out your production costs. I get to be flip about it and say, I only care about marketing. So I'm going to assume that you arrive at a product that's ready to harvest, and you have to figure that part out, and I'm going to help you from here on to the end. But that's a great question. Thank you. Okay, the profit. The profit, as I calculate it here, is only gross sales. This is to your point. Gross sales minus the amount of labor and mileage that it took to sell that way. Okay, that's all I'm going to look at. So this is not implying the real profit of you and your enterprise. This is a marketing-specific profit for each individual channel. When we look at those numbers, the CSA was the highest with a profit as a percent of gross sales. The CSA was letting this farm keep 85% of gross sales as profit, right? Because all we took off of here was the cost of their labor and mileage, which was minimum for the amount of product that they were able to sell, right? The gross sales. The Watkins Glen Farmers Market that I love to pick on over here, okay, for each dollar in gross sales, they were losing, what's that, 75 cents to marketing costs in the form of labor and travel. So rank number 1 and on down. All right, this I leave up to the farm. Each channel has risks. I started to discuss some of those risks. Up by us, processor is booked is a big risk. Is that a problem down here? I didn't see it come up on your survey, so it kind of made me wonder. Where we are, people can't get into USDA-inspected slaughterhouses in a timely fashion. So
You got to plan ahead.
you got to plan ahead, but you can get it done.
Right.
Okay, that's great. That's great to hear. Each channel presents its own unique risks, and I've got them listed out. I won't bother to read them all. And then there's just what do you enjoy doing? Those are your preferences. So you could rank, in essence, each channel the same way. All right, so when you've done all that ranking, and I just walked you through, very carefully through each one, you just wind up with a final score. I'm going to look at this one here. This is unweighted. So we had the CSA, and it won first place on so many of those factors that we measured that it winds up being the overall winner as the best performing channel, right? And then we can look here, the restaurant trade, even though it was, dismal in terms of volume of product, it came up in second place. So you could just look at this rank, and if you had to eliminate one thing from your marketing, you would be informed on how to do that, right? The farmers markets, they basically all tied for last, right? With a slight edge out by the Watkins Glen Farmers Market. But this is the end result of doing this exercise. What's the practical application? If you're considering a marketing change, yeah? Yeah, yep. It does get a little muddy. Each channel has associated costs that we don't track because, frankly, I couldn't get the farmers to track them for me. I gave them, a log or something that I made up, and I came to pick it up, and guess what? Nobody did it. There's very little that you can track, and you have to feel like this is going to be worth something after I go through this pain of carrying this sheet around and keeping track. So if you're combining channels, in essence, which is what you're talking about, is going to have a CSA pickup at the farmer's market. We work with the farm, we look at the hours of data, and we try to split it out proportionately. But yeah, it's as good as we can do. The other thing about CSAs, there is off-season marketing that's not accounted here, right? Because usually you're selling your shares. I mean, maybe not with meat CSAs, but a lot with produce CSAs. You're selling your shares in February and March. I don't have those hours accounted for, but I'm going to lump them in with the associated costs. All right, so the practical application, this is most useful for farms that are considering a marketing change because usually they're just doing too much. They've got themselves involved in a lot of farmers markets, the CSA, maybe a farm store, restaurant sales with a lot of deliveries, natural food stores with a lot of deliveries. All right, logically, you would reduce or eliminate the worst performing channel. There's ways to reduce it if you find it's not working. And what I found with meat, and Brian's going to talk about pricing cuts, with meat, a nice thing that you can do is take a poor performing channel and use pricing to push that channel up to where it's a top performer. If you say, I just don't want to give up that restaurant, but it's my worst performing channel, well, the easiest way to fix it is jack up your prices until it's worth the time. If they stop buying from you, you eliminated the channel, right? But you've kind of figured out at this point, it's not worth doing this, right? I do way better everywhere else I go. Okay, you would increase the participation in the best performing channel. How could you increase it? Well, if it was a farmer's market, you could try to join another farmer's market. Or you could bring additional products to the market to increase sales. If it was a restaurant, you could try to talk that restaurant into buying more from you. Like, hey, you're buying my ground beef. Have you seen my sirloins, right? Now you're getting more done. You've expanded that channel. Or likewise, you could add a second restaurant, right? Or a third restaurant. So there's ways to increase and there's ways to reduce, or you could just eliminate the worst performing channel. There is a logic to strategically combining multiple channels to get, basically in this case, to get all those cuts sold, which I'll talk about in a second. And to use channels together to really move all your product and reduce your risk. And then, as I've just mentioned, you could adjust pricing. Here's just some examples, some random examples from farms that I work with on how they combine different marketing channels to move. Basically, it always boils down to high-value cuts and low-value cuts. So they're selling high-value cuts to the restaurant, and then they sell the rest of their cuts on the farm. I work with a pork farm that does this. It's not like they sat down and wrote a business plan and said, this is our strategy, but de facto, this is how they market, and this is how they balance selling whole hogs with two different channels. Another one, they have a farmer's market in a wealthy suburb, and they also have a more traditional, I remember the traditional buyer, a more traditional farmer's market that's rural with lower pricing, and they only bring the cuts that make sense to each one of those markets. And then you could have this example of saving out your best cuts for the meat CSA members and selling the rest to restaurants. But there's lots of different combinations. The point is, those combinations help you get everything sold and do it in an efficient way. All right, I think I've sort of talked about that. I'll say this, I won't overstep my bounds, but I'll somewhat volunteer Ginger. I've come up with the methodology for livestock farms just very, very recently, and it's available. So if you're in a position where you feel like you are doing, let's say this, too many hours are going into marketing, and you're selling in 4 or 5 different ways, and you're asking, which one is the dud? so I can cut it free, then this would be useful for you. I'd say if you're only marketing in 2 different ways, you probably don't need to do a livestock marketing channel assessment. You probably already know one's better than the other. But if you're in multiple channels and you're starting to think about what to change, then this would be useful, and I would make it available to you and facilitate it with Ginger. The onus is on you. You do the data collection on your farm. It has to be done, with a lot of attention so that it's of value when we put it through an Excel spreadsheet. I have a few publications out. This guide, they're both free and they're both online. This guide to marketing channel selection, how to sell through wholesale and direct marketing channels. It gives tips on how to get into new channels. It's written, again, I started all this assessment work with produce growers and adapted it for livestock growers. So it's written with a lot of produce focus, but it also gives general tips for getting into restaurants and things that doesn't matter what your product is. And then there's a couple smart marketing articles on Cornell's website from September and October of 2010 as well as October of 2012 with strategies and tips specifically about meat marketing.
Now, are you saying if they're interested in participating in this market channel decision project,
Yes.
they should send me that email, and I'll collect who wants to get it, and then I'll coordinate with you to send the forms and collect the data.
Exactly what she said.
We'll have our own little market selection process in Maryland using the Cornell tool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sounds like a grant coming up.
Yeah. How are we on time now?
Pardon?
How are we on time?
We've got plenty of time. We can go to Q&A while I
Okay.
do recording.
Okay.
Or you want to do other slides?
I have a few extra slides. Oh yeah, and so my contact information is in the packet. This is some of what led me to come up with a marketing channel assessment tool. My background's in meat marketing, and I really love working with livestock producers. So I had farms asking me questions about how to sell, and this is a really basic way to compare some marketing channels. I just wanted to walk you through it. Just follow me because there's a lot of information up there, but it'll be pretty obvious. Let's look at the live animal marketing channel. This is commodity sales at USDA posted prices. So the weight that the selling price is based on is a hanging weight, right? And we're going to assume that this is a 660-pound carcass. The price at the time that I first did this on the USDA site was $1.45 a pound. How many hours is it going to take you to market one head this way? I think 2 hours could even be more time than it really takes. But I'm going to put in 2 hours of your labor. All of the meat, all of the weight gets sold instantly. So you have a gross sales of $957. All right? Your marketing costs were $2 because you're going to send in your beef checkoff dollar. Everybody does that? $1 a head to beef checkoff, and then there's a $1 a head marketing fee in this channel. So your marketing profit per head, $955. For each hour that you worked, instead of giving you a pay rate and subtracting that, I'm just going to look at the profit in terms of each hour that you worked, $478 because we only had 2 hours. Everybody follow me through that one? All right, let's go to the next channel, the freezer trade, my favorite. Freezer trade, selling quarters and halves. Still working with a beef here. So the price is still based on hanging weight, and it's the same weight. This was as of a year ago, this was the average of 14 farms around me. This was their price. These days, it's actually a bit higher. $2.65 a pound hanging weight. It's going to take longer to sell one head. I'm going to assume that you're going to have 4 conversations for each family that's buying a quarter from you. And you get all the weight sold, so your gross sales is $1,749. Your costs, you paid the butchering, so I broke that out down here. $20 to truck it to slaughterhouse, $50 for a kill fee, cut and wrap at 55 cents a pound. That's the going rate around where we are. Still going to mail in $1 to the beef checkoff program. I don't know how that cut and wrap price compares to down here. That's about right. In New England, it's as high as $1 and more, cut and wrap. A pound, yeah. It's pretty excruciating. All right. All right, so you see how I put those costs in. So now your marketing profit per head was $1,300. But in terms of your time, it comes out to more like, $219 for each hour you put in. Follow me through that one? Was compared to the farmer's market. The weight that the price is going to be based on is a retail weight, right? This is after all this carcass weight was cut and trimmed. And so I used that assumption of, what is that? I don't remember now if it's 60 or 65%, but I used that assumption. We came up with the same, you start with the same carcass weight. We have 429 pounds in our hands to sell. The average selling price at the farmer's market, if you do a weighted average, is $7 a pound. So it takes a lot of hours to sell 429 pounds. I figured it takes 36 hours, and I broke that out down here. Okay, so this isn't data from a real farm that sells at the farmer's market. She told me she sold basically 72 pounds per market. Each market is 4 hours. So it takes 6 markets at 6 hours each because there's 4 hours of selling time plus there's an hour to get there and set up and an hour to take down and drive home. You follow that? And then it costs $15 to be at the market each day that she's at the market. So that's some of those assumptions I built in here. We get 36 hours. We sold all the meat. Our gross was $3,000. Our costs were all those same processing costs plus the market fees and $1 for the beef checkoff program. So our marketing profit per head was much higher. But if you look at it in terms of our time, it's, comparatively, it's weak. So this is something I did early on that led me to want to do more. It also led me to conclude that if I were finishing beef today at my house, I would sell in the freezer trade. I think it's a nice balance of getting a high gross per head and a good value for the time that you spend marketing. Once I identified that the freezer trade, in my opinion, was sort of the sweet spot for marketing meat, I figured, well, how can we expand the sales of freezer trade in my region? And that's what led to the meat locker program that you heard about in the beginning. But I just wanted to share that spreadsheet with you. Again, we work with the data we can. When you have a small business, which is your farm, you have decisions to make. And when you decide what you're trying to examine, then you figure out how can you collect the data that you need to answer that question, and you do the best you can. And so that's what this is. This is a short version. I don't have the are there any other economists in the room? All right. I don't have, depreciation on the tractor figured in here. That's more like production oriented anyway.